This is Democracy Now!, democracynow.org. I'm Amy Goodman with Juan Gonzalez. We end today's show looking at MAGA Inc., the name of a new report by CorpWatch, looking at what it calls Trump's world of crypto czars, tech titans, and prison profiteers. The report examines how many of President Trump's allies are profiting from his second presidency. We go now to London, where we're joined by Pratap Chatterjee, Executive Director of CorpWatch. Pratap, thanks so much for being with us. Tell us what you found. Describe MAGA Inc.
Thank you, Amy. What we've discovered, taking a deep dive into the businesses that profited from Trump, you can group many of them into these categories: the crypto czars and the tech titans and the prison profiteers. The crypto czars are companies like World Liberty Financial, which is actually a Trump family venture between his sons and the sons of Steve Witkoff. And what they're doing is they're cashing in on the cryptocurrency boom, together with companies like Tether. And what they do is they sell stable coins and decentralized finance. So these are schemes by which you can move money anonymously around the world, something that drug dealers, gun manufacturers, or gun dealers and criminals love. This is the sort of business that is now benefiting the Trump family. So this is the first aspect. He himself and his family have basically taken a cut of those proceeds and literally doubled his fortune from probably $3 billion to about $6 billion purely by taking a cut out of these proceeds. The second group of people we're looking at are the tech titans. So these are the OpenAI, companies like OpenAI and companies like Oracle that are running vast databases, and they have been, their data is being used by companies like Palantir. And so Trump, the day after he was elected, brought Larry Ellison and Sam Altman of OpenAI to the White House, and he said that he would be helping them get energy for these data centers. And one of the key things that you need for a data center is an uninterrupted supply of power. So this means that he is giving contracts to people like Kelsey Warren, who runs energy transfer pipelines, and they are supplying gas to data centers in Texas, in places like Abilene in central Texas, in Amarillo, in San Antonio. And this is extremely profitable, but it also has a huge impact on local groundwater supplies. We're talking $250 billion worth of gallons of water being used by data centers across the country, and it's going to double. So this is a huge, huge problem. But not only that, the data that they're using and vacuum up is going to companies like Palantir, another big Trump supporter. And Palantir is using this data to help ICE round up people throughout the country and to provide to the Pentagon to use for things like Project Maven to target people in wars in countries like Iran. In fact, the Minab strike, the girls' school that was hit early on in Operation Epic Fury, was a result of Palantir's data gathering, data analysis. So this is a huge problem because these companies, these profiteers, are supporting Trump, and now they're reaping the benefits. But perhaps the biggest amount of money has come from gone to the prison profiteers. So companies like Geo Group and CoreCivic in New York, Geo Group, which runs the Delaney detention center in New Jersey, CoreCivic, which runs huge detention centers in places like Leavenworth, Kansas, and in California City in California. So they, particularly a company called CSI Aviation, it's an air broker company. They essentially operate airlines to deport people from the United States to countries like Brazil and the Honduras. They shackle prisoners and they deport them. And they literally are the biggest beneficiary of new federal contracts. So these are some of the people. The CEO of CSI is a man by the name of Alan Way, another big fundraiser for Trump. So these are the people that we think are profiting the most out of MAGA, the business of deportation, the business of gathering data and analyzing for, and also the crypto scams by which people's money is being transferred anonymously and profit is being made by the Trump family themselves.
And Pratap, I wanted to ask you, some folks are missing from this analysis. First of all, in the tech titans, would you also include companies like Amazon and Musk's empire of Tesla and SpaceX as well, and also all of these different divisions, as you describe it, of Trump's of MAGA Incorporated depend on finance capital. Don't they also depend or are underwritten largely by private equity firms like Blackstone and Apollo, KKR, Carlyle Group?
And Pratap, you have 30 seconds.
Yes. Well, the biggest profiteer out of this, the banking companies, are really Cantor Fitzgerald, run by the sons of Howard Lutnick, the U.S. Secretary of Commerce. And they have made literally a killing in providing money for the data centers and also for crypto companies like Tether and World Liberty Financial. These are the people that have made the most money out of it. Of course, companies like Amazon also provide the data, the cloud support for Innovation OS.
We're going to have to end
Elite.
it there, but we're going to continue in a post show and post online at democracynow.org. Pratap Chatterjee, Executive Director of CorpWatch, will link to your new report, MAGA Inc., A Guide to Trump's World of Crypto Czars, Tech Titans, and Prison Profiteers. I'll be tonight at the IFC for the final screening of the film about Democracy Now! Steal the story, please. Go to democracynow.org. Presidency. We continue with part 2 of our conversation with Pratap Chatterjee, Executive Director of CorpWatch. He's speaking to us from London. Pratap, at the end of part 1, you started to talk about Howard Lutnick and Cantor Fitzgerald. How does Cantor Fitzgerald link into MAGA Inc. and President Trump?
Sure. So Cantor Fitzgerald is a long-time Wall Street firm. It's not very well known because it's not a bank like Citibank or Bank of America, but they provide financial services. And for decades, it was run by a man by the name of Howard Lutnick, whom many listeners will know is now the Secretary of Commerce. He ran it for probably about 30 years. When he left to become Secretary of Commerce, he handed over control to his 2 sons, Brandon and Kyle. Brandon is just 27. But the key thing that Cantor Fitzgerald has been funding over the last several years before the Trump presidency and continuing today is data centers, and also they have been putting money into cryptocurrency. So, for example, Tether, which is the world's largest issuer of stable coins, is funded by Cantor Fitzgerald. So they gave them, I think, $500 million to be able to do cryptocurrency business. And if the company, if Tether is able to raise money in the stock market, this could be a return of $25 billion to Cantor Fitzgerald, in other words, the family of Howard Lutnick and his sons. In addition, they gave $7 billion in loans to the data center in the Stargate data center in Abilene, Texas. And they're looking at giving similar amounts of money, or probably about $4 billion, to CoreWeave in Lancaster, Pennsylvania. And likewise, hundreds of millions of dollars to the Fermi data center in Amarillo, Texas. The reason they're doing this, of course, is it's extremely profitable, but a lot of these data centers need money to be able to expand the amount of computer servers they can hold for AI, for artificial intelligence. The bandwidth, the amount of computing power that is needed for companies like OpenAI, et cetera, is huge. And so they want to be able to run these data centers, which will be able to basically calculate out answers for the questions people ask every day on OpenAI, ChatGPT in particular. And in order to keep those data centers running, they need uninterrupted power supply. And these power supplies are provided by natural gas companies. So Energy Transfer, run by Kelsey Warren, another huge donor to Donald Trump, $20 million personally from him and his company, is the kind of projects
which
that are
also runs the
needed.
Dakota Access Pipeline.
Energy Transfer has gone after groups like Greenpeace for their opposition to the DAPL pipeline in North Dakota, and they have sued them because Greenpeace, of course, has deeper pockets than the local tribes and the local activists, and won a lawsuit against them in the courts in North Dakota, which is a real problem. Greenpeace now looks to having to pay a fine of $345 million because they protest against the environmental impact of the Dakota Access Pipeline in North Dakota.
Pratap, I wanted to go back to Palantir. We know about its contracts with governments. What about with nonprofits? You were on the board of Amnesty International. Talk about your experience.
So I actually know Palantir quite well. And years ago, probably about 15 years ago, I encountered them on two different occasions. One is I was working for a think tank called the Center for American Progress. And as a part of that, I actually was advising them and helping them crack down on government federal contract profiteering, particularly war profiteering in countries like Iraq and Afghanistan, where I spent a lot of time. And at one point, I was asked to go and talk to people at the White House about how to improve federal contracting. And one of the companies that came to meet with us was a company called Palantir. And Palantir, at the time, which was just kind of starting up, showed us what they could do with data. They took data and they put it into a software program, and what came out were these beautiful images and things like that. But it was clearly just a spreadsheet on steroids. And eventually, we realized that what they were doing, well, first of all, the product was not very good. But then they approached me, they approached Amnesty a couple of years later when I was on the board of Amnesty US. And they offered to take Amnesty's data for free and analyze it to help Amnesty be able to reach more people. And I realized at that point that A, they had a bad product, but they were using it in order to be able to take Amnesty data. And I was asked by Amnesty's leadership to weigh in on it, and I told them, absolutely not. I know that right now Palantir is vacuuming up driver's license plates, trying to track people down for immigration enforcement. And Amnesty took my advice and canceled the contract. So I was quite astonished to discover that, in fact, this is not just simply how they did business with Amnesty and with people in the White House, but in fact, later on, they've been doing this across the world. In Britain, for example, where I now live, they have offered cheap contracts to the Metropolitan Police, to the National Health Service, to say they will help you analyze your data. And the reason they do this is because once they have the contract, they can then inflate costs and make a lot of money. And most importantly, one thing that I've noticed in reviewing Palantir in countries, meeting with soldiers and traveling in countries like in Iraq and Afghanistan, and seeing what they do here in Britain, is I realize they're actually taking advantage of the fact that the police and the military are overwhelmed by data and they don't know what to do with it. And so when you present them with a solution that shows them a target, shows them somebody they can arrest, the governments love it. They lap it up, they pay good money. And the people who know the problem with this are the nurses and doctors of the National Health Scheme, because they see that, in fact, when Palantir takes their data, it actually doesn't improve any of the quality of service when they deliver medical care to people in England. So you have this situation where Palantir is taking data, turning it into fancy graphics and pictures and things like that, and selling it back as a solution, when in fact, what they're doing is often quite wrong, as we discovered when Palantir's analysis resulted in the killing of 100 girls in Minab in Iran. And when we see the kind of data, the result of the I think it was 140,000 people deported last year, of which 77% had no criminal record. And of the last 23%, of the 23% remaining, only 0.5% had been found guilty or at least accused of homicide. What Palantir is doing is selling a bad product. They are selling it to gullible governments. And the only people who can see through this are actually people who use the data. And surprisingly, actually, there was a court case in Oregon where there was an ICE agent who said, this data is bad. You know, we can't use this. So this is the problem with Palantir's contracts. And what I will say today is, luckily, a lot of people have figured out this problem. And the Metropolitan Police here in London, Sadiq Khan, the Mayor of London, refused a £50 million contract with Palantir. The British government is now looking into cancelling the £330 million contract with Palantir for the National Health Service. 9 agencies in Switzerland have also refused Palantir contracts, and most recently the French government has also said that they're not going to use Palantir because they're worried about their data being handed over to the Trump administration.
And finally, Pratap, the issue of the resistance when it comes to the whole world of MAGA Inc., as you describe it, a guide to Trump's world of crypto czars, tech titans, and prison profiteers.
The resistance, I think, is local, but it is widespread. And across the country, there are people that are organizing against data centers in particular, and they are also organizing against prison detention centers and prisons.
The for-profit prison industry.
The for-profit, sorry. Yes, you're right. People are organized against the for-profit prison industry and also against the detention centers that ICE is trying to set up across the country to hold people before they detain them. And the Choctaw Nation, for example, in Oklahoma, refused and kicked out ICE from setting up a detention center there. That was a deal promoted by Newmark, a subsidiary of Cantor Fitzgerald. You have people, I think something like $156 billion worth of data centers, some 48 data centers across the United States that have been canceled in the last 12 months alone because of local opposition. So something like 12 states are looking to ban new data centers. Something like 70 local governments are looking to also ban data centers in their cities. So I think it's on the ground. It's local, but the resistance is building across the country. And people are realizing that they need to stop these data centers before they ruin their quality of life. But also they're pushing back against the detention centers. So Delaney Hall in New Jersey, we've seen in the last couple of weeks that there has been huge protests inside the prison, outside the prison, joined by the mayor of New York, the mayor of Newark, New Jersey, Ras Baraka. Even the governor, Mikey Sherrill, has come out. And the senator, Andy Kim, was at a protest where he was struck by ICE projectiles. So there is a resistance, and it's being led not just by community groups and people who don't want things in their backyard, but also by local mayors, indigenous communities. And I believe that we will see a much greater resistance in the next couple of years against the Trump and the MAGA agenda.
Pratap, I wanted to switch gears for a minute. We're speaking to you in London. Seismic upheaval in Britain with the resignation of Prime Minister Keir Starmer and the possible rise of now MP, former Mayor of Manchester, Andy Burnham. Can you talk about who Burnham is? Sure.
Andy Burnham, also known as the King of the North, he was the Mayor of Manchester until about 2 days ago, is hopefully a much better will be, if all goes well, a much better Prime Minister than Keir Starmer. He is a man that is certainly more likable and a better speaker, but beyond that, he has spoken up on a lot of things. perhaps he can't solve Britain's problems with the National Health Service. Perhaps it's going to be hard to be able to cut back on austerity. But certainly he has spoken out in years past about neoliberalism. And in particular, in his couple of years as mayor, he has rolled back privatization, which has had such a devastating impact across Britain. So he, in Manchester, the bus service as throughout Britain was privatized, and as a result you had companies competing against them, charging £4, which is I think about $6 for rides, and with the help of community groups, Andy Burnham was able to remunicipalize the bus system and replace the private bus companies with a new set of yellow buses. And so I hope that, in fact, if he keeps up what he's been talking about, that he will, in fact, roll back some of the privatization. He's talked about bringing the water companies back under control, Thames Water in particular, which supplies water to London and is a completely failing business that nobody even wants to fund. So I do have hopes that he will be different from Keir Starmer in the way that he tackles these important issues of privatization, and that he will challenge neoliberalism, and that hopefully he will also speak up for the people of Palestine, which he has visited in the past.
Pratap, I want to thank you so much for being with us. Pratap Chatterjee, Executive Director of CorpWatch, will link to your new report, MAGA Inc., A Guide to Trump's World of Crypto Czars, Tech Titans, and Prison Profiteers. To see part one of our discussion, go to democracynow.org. I'm Amy Goodman. Thanks so much for joining us. Thanks for watching Democracy Now! On YouTube. Subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications to make sure you never miss a video. And for more of our audience-supported journalism, go to democracynow.org, where you can download our news app, sign up for our newsletter, subscribe to the daily podcast, and so much more.